And that's all coming up in tonight's action-packed show. Prepare for a huge ding-dong. But first, here's your latest news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Martin, thank you very much and good evening. The top stories. More than 50,000 migrants have crossed the English Channel in small boats since the Keir Starmer became Prime Minister. The milestone passed yesterday is still climbing. So far today, another 220 people made the journey from France, with 3 small boats still on the water. It brings this year's total to more than 27,000. It comes less than a week after Labour's returns deal with France came into force, but people smugglers have still sent more than 1,500 migrants across in that time. The government insists its new border security command and tougher legislation will cut the numbers, but also warns the results will take time. The number of people claiming universal credit has hit a record 8 million, the highest since the benefit was introduced in 2013. Official figures show a jump of more than 1 million in the past year, driven almost entirely by those not required to work, now at 3.7 million. That group includes people in full-time education, parents with very young children, pensioners and those deemed to have no prospect of work. Labour says it inherited a broken welfare system from the Conservatives and is tightening rules on who can claim. Meanwhile, Britain's unemployment rate is holding at a 4-year high as job vacancies fall to their lowest level since 2021. The ONS says unemployment stayed at 4.7% in the 3 months to June, while vacancies dropped by 44,000. Hospitality and retail saw the biggest payroll losses, with overall employee numbers falling in 10 of the past 12 months. Wage growth held at 5%, but after inflation, that's just 1.5% as the cost of living continues to rise. The Bank of England warns joblessness is likely to climb further this year, even after cutting interest rates to 4% last week. Britain's unemployment rate is holding, as I said, at that 4-year high. And lastly, temperatures peaked at 33.4 degrees in the UK today as Britain saw its 4th heat wave of the summer. The highest readings were recorded in Benson, Oxfordshire and in Northolt in West London. The all-time hottest day was 38.5 degrees in Faversham in Kent on August the 10th of 2003. Amber and yellow heat health alerts currently in force for all of England. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More from me in an hour.
Tune into GB News Radio wherever you are. Online, on DAB digital radio, on TuneIn, on Radio Player and on your smart speaker. Just say, play GB News.
Thank you, Tatiana. Welcome to Farage. Now, astonishing new data has been published today that has yet again smashed the myth that mass migration is good for Britain's economy. First, we have the jobless numbers. An incredible 1 in 5 people who are currently unemployed in Britain aren't even British. And that, my friends, is a record number. But we also have the universal credit data out today also. And believe this, there are now 1.3 million non-UK nationals claiming universal credit in Britain each and every month. And that means that you, the humble British taxpayer, is footing a bill of roughly £1 billion every month. That's £12 billion every year for people's welfare payments who aren't even from this country. But these were people who were let into this country under the pretence that it was good for the British economy. How many times have we heard that immigrants pay more in than they take out? Well, some of you may remember a few months back on my 3 p.m. programme, we hosted this eye-popping debate.
It very clearly says in the footnotes, which you, since you're a clown, obviously a faux think tank, didn't bother to read. It says very clearly...
Jonathan, there's no need to be insulting. Please don't insult my guests. We don't do that to you. Treat them with respect and stick to the data. Please answer the questions and don't be rude.
It says this data cannot be used as a proxy for nationality.
You're confusing NINO registration at the point of someone registering for national insurance number, which is where you do end up arguably with a load of foreign-born individuals that become British citizens. But this freedom of information request done by the Centre for Policy Studies very clearly requests foreign nationals, individuals that haven't obtained British citizenship. So you can read whatever you like off the screen, but the fact of the matter is, Jonathan, it's wrong.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was the mere undercard, the prawn cocktail. Get ready for the main event. Get ready for the ribeye steak. Ding, ding, it's round 2. Rumble in the Jungle, Universal Credit Edition. I'm joined now by the Research Director at the Centre for Migration Control, Rob Bates, joins me in the studio, and also down the line by the Professor of Economics at King's College London, Jonathan Portes. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Please, no swearing. Keep it clean. Let's start in the studio with you, Rob Bates. An incredible double whammy of data out today. First of all is the jobless figures. An incredible amount of jobless. 21.5% of all unemployed people in the UK now born overseas. But here's the bigger question. What does this all cost us? Robert Bates, what is the astonishing bill to the British taxpayer?
Well, I'm very grateful that the DWP has finally decided to actually publish this data, because what it really reveals is the sheer costs that for too long the open border advocates have been trying to deny. What we are seeing now is really the data of the last 12 months, that the British taxpayer has been forced to stump up roughly between the remit of 11 billion and 15 billion pounds a year to cover the universal credit claims of people that are not even citizens of this country. This is effectively money that has been thrown down the drain, and there has been no benefit from paying this money to the British taxpayer. I think the other statistics that came out today on the ONS showing that 1 in 5 foreign nationals account for 1 in 5 of those that are unemployed also reflects the sheer fact that our mass migration system has really been centred around importing low-wage, low-skilled individuals who actually offer very little to the British economy. And I think really now we're at a point where there is no arguing with these statistics. 1.3 million people claiming universal credit is a staggering number. And I think the question now has to be asked is, how do we solve this? And I think there needs to be a conversation about whether we start beginning to scrap indefinitely to remain, we start beginning to assess the settlement status of some individuals that have that indefinitely to remain, and try and do as much as we can to reduce the burden on the British taxpayer.
Jonathan Portes, the figures are eye-popping. This is unsustainable. Today's figures adding further fuel to that fire. We simply can't afford this.
Well, what today's figures show, and you're right, they do tell us quite a bit, is that people born abroad, people who originally migrated to this country, are more likely to be in work than Britons. That's true of people coming from the EU, and it's true from people born outside the EU. So in both cases, they are more likely to be in work than Britons. And we also know from other data that on average, both people from the EU and people from outside the EU have slightly higher salaries than people born in this country. And we also know from the data that they're slightly less likely to be claiming benefits. So the question of who pays in more and who takes out more is, as you say, clearly answered by the data. On average, migrants contribute slightly more. They're slightly more likely to be in work. They have slightly higher salaries. They're slightly less likely to be claiming benefits. That's what the data shows. It's what I said several months ago. So the overall equation is absolutely clear. Now, we know that some people like Robert Bates want to deport people who've settled here, who've made their lives, who are contributing to the UK economy, and we know perfectly well why that is. But we should be absolutely clear on the bottom line here, Martin, because you're the one who was talking about the bottom line and about knowing who pays in, who's paying the bills, and who's getting the benefits. And the overall bottom line is quite clear. Is it the case, Robert, you've seen the data from today, is it the case that people born outside the EU are more likely to be, if they're of working age, are more likely to be in work than people born in the UK? Simple question.
Rob Bates.
Well, first of all, I think it takes a lot of humility for Jonathan to come back on this show and discuss these figures, given how horrifically wrong he was when we first debated this.
Can you actually, for once...
So, Jonathan, 1 in 5 people in the country...
Jonathan Portes, Jonathan, let Rob Bates answer the question. Rob Bates.
1 in 5 people in this country are unemployed foreign nationals. They constitute about 16% of the working age population. That, by my rough calculations, and granted I'm not a professor of economics at King's College University, but by my calculations that's an overrepresentation in the statistics. And of course, let's look as well at some of the other claims that you made, where you said that foreign nationals were disproportionately likely to be claiming universal credit. That is an absolutely ridiculous claim to be making.
Gentlemen, one at a time.
Robert, a very simple question.
I answered it. Jonathan, let's not start a
EU?
shouting contest. People at home simply can't hear. Rob Bates, the question was quite straightforward in terms of the numbers. Is it more likely? But also, let's talk about the types of people paying in. We all know, for example, that those from Australia, from America, from Switzerland, from Malta, from Cyprus, they pay
India,
a huge amount
from
in, but that's
Nigeria.
not the same.
That's true,
not the
Jonathan.
same as those from
It is true.
Afghanistan,
It's
from
in today's
Eritrea.
data as well.
Rob Bates.
So what Jonathan is citing when it comes to the wages being paid by migrants is he's looking at the overall population of Britain aged 16 to 64 versus just those foreign nationals and migrants that are actually in work. So he's comparing, as happens a lot, apples and pears. So that's a completely bogus claim that I'd advise your users to just disregard. And then when you consider the benefits claimants, which Jonathan is very, very deftly trying to avoid conversing about here, 1.3 million foreign nationals, Jonathan, are claiming universal credit alone in this country. And that's before we get into the other benefit types. You've previously described that as fake news. I'd like to know whether you still stand by that description, because now we have actual DWP data. Is that still your view that it's fake news to describe 1.3 million foreign nationals claiming benefits? What do we get for that money, Jonathan?
I note once, so let me be very clear. I asked Robert a simple question, whether he had read today's data, which
I answered.
Very
Wait.
No,
Jonathan, I've answered that very clearly.
Let me finish.
Let Jonathan go.
Can I finish? Robert did not answer the question of whether non-UK nationals, whether they're from the EU or outside the EU, both groups are more likely to be in work than UK people who were born in the UK. So people who are born in the outside the EU, people who are born inside the EU, more likely to be in work. Slightly more likely to be unemployed, but much more less likely to be inactive. So that's why Robert, of course, is trying to mislead you.
Well, no, the point is, Jonathan, of course, as we well know,
Jonathan,
there's a huge problem in terms of the British population as a control for successive governments, albeit the DWP in a large part has been the fault of this. I'm aware that you previously worked there as well, has created a situation where we have a large number of Brits economically inactive. I'm not disputing that. My argument is there should not be a single foreign national in this country of working age who is not pulling their weight, who is not making a contribution. Otherwise, why are they here? That's my point, Jonathan. Can you address why we have over 1 million people that were born overseas and hold a citizenship of another country not working? What's the point of them being here?
So let me answer that. But first, just let me once again make clear that Robert has refused once again to state what was in today's figures, which was that people born outside the UK are more likely to be in work, less likely to be inactive, and on average, even though more of them in work, are also likely to have slightly higher salaries. So, of course, the overall
we discussed
balance...
that, Jonathan. You're comparing apples and pears with that. But can you address the question, why is it acceptable for there to be over 1 million foreign nationals in this country not working? What's the point of it? What's the benefit to the British public?
I just want to
No, answer that one, please.
Wait, let's see. The apples and pears point, yes, they're more likely to be in work and they're paying slightly higher wages. So overall, of course, the balance is clear. You're a bit confused here. I understand that. That's because you don't really understand the data.
Now answer the question, mate. 1 million people not contributing. What's the point of them? That's his question. Answer it.
Well, first of all, of course, there's 2 points here. Quite a lot of those people on universal credit, whether they're British or foreign, are, of course, in work. So that's the second point. But
most of them aren't, of course. Most of them aren't, of course. Of the 1.3 million, over half aren't working. So again, let's just fact check Jonathan Portes, as seems to be becoming my hobby. Let's just clarify the facts here, Jonathan, and make sure that we're aware that over half of those claiming universal credit aren't in work.
Wait. I did fact check you and made clear that of course some of them in work, not all of them are in work. That's quite true. But since you've got the facts wrong on the numbers who are in work and how much they're earning, which is the main point about whether they're making more of a contribution than the average.
759,375,000 foreign nationals, Jonathan Portes, are out of work.
I was just coming to that, Martin. Let me.
Go on then, mate. We haven't got all night.
Yes. So first of all, the substantial majority of those are actually not people who arrived in the last few years, because the vast majority of those people are people who qualified under the EU settlement scheme. That is, the reason that they have the status which allows them to claim benefits is, first of all, that we are members of the EU, and second of all, the Brexit deal, which guaranteed them those rights in perpetuity, a deal which, of course, was very much supported by GBNews. So the main reason...
I was waiting for this to be the fault of Brexit. I was waiting. I've got the full house.
Yes, but you're not denying that that's the case. I mean, we can see the data, right? I have the data.
Yeah, well,
in front
and
of
the
me.
EUSS was a absolute catastrophic decision. It was the May wave, to coin a phrase. Let's talk about the Boris wave when we look at the number of non-EU citizens that are beginning to claim universal credit when it comes to indefinite leave to remain. We've seen a 40% leap in people on settled status, indefinite leave to remain, claiming universal credit in the last year alone. And this is before we've even got to the point where Boris Johnson's migration policy and those that arrived under that policy are beginning to claim settled status. We are sitting on a sleeping time bomb here, and things are very, very precarious.
If I could try and explain the facts, because having pointed out the thing which neither of you wanted to point out, which is the vast majority of the people who are claiming universal credit who were originally foreign nationals are in fact people who were given that right by the Brexit deal.
I'm sure that makes the British taxpayer feel a lot better.
We have established that. But of those, both in that group and the people who got it because they have at one point had indefinite leave to remain. Again, these people, that is their status when they claim benefit. So a substantial proportion, again, we do not know how many, but remember the EU settlement scheme came in 5 years ago. Substantial proportion of those people will now be British citizens. Now, I know Robert Bates would be quite happy deporting Brits who are of the wrong colour, but I think most of us would not. And again, that's
if you're talking about the EU settlements, I mean, you're going down this weird tangent, which you always seem to do. You're obsessed with this on Blue Sky, you and the Sunders of the world.
Guys, we have to leave it. Just a quick fact check on you there, Jonathan Portis, to end off. The worst offenders are non-EU on 242,147 who are out of work, and then it's EU residents 103,242. So I'm afraid you've been fact-checked. To close this off again. No, I haven't, Jonathan Portis. It's out there. It's the ONS official data for unemployment.
You have the data right in front of me, Martin.
Log on to the ONS. There are two reports out today, one on universal credit, one on unemployment. I just told you the facts. Go and Google it. Thank you, Jonathan Portis. Always a pleasure. And also Robert Bates. See, we told you to get live. He's beautiful. Now, coming up next, in a moment, as GBNews reveals the 50,000 migrant milestone for Sir Keir Starmer. You'll not believe the government's latest excuse. Guess what? It was all about the Tories. That's next.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power?
Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber.
Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics.
We'll see where this ruling takes us.
These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
You've read the headlines, you've heard what those in power have to say. How about now we actually get to the truth?
They would pay attention.
We go beyond the political theatre and tell you what's really going on behind the scenes. For a massive council tax hike, one of the biggest in the UK. Others follow their lines, but we go off script.
You sound like a broken record. You say that week after week.
Cutting through the narratives and giving you unique perspectives. That's Ben Leo tonight, Saturdays and Sundays from 9 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays, I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, what a lively start this was, and we're just getting warmed up. Welcome back to Farage with me, your host, Martin Dorby. Now, do you remember the Labour Party's promise to stop the migrant crisis?
To go after the criminal gangs, to smash the gang networks.
To smash the smuggling gangs.
Smash the gangs. To smash the gangs.
Well, the gangs weren't listening because today marks yet another very grim milestone for the Labour Party since taking office in July last year. 50,600 now is the total migrants have entered the UK illegally via small boats. And while the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, has said the numbers will come down, honest Governor, I promise. Labour Minister Jackie Smith, Baroness Smith, today has said the Tories are to blame. The Tories are to blame because they focused on gimmicks like Rwanda. But more than 1 year on, is it really still fair to keep on blaming the Conservatives? And it doesn't end there, because the government has also had itself fact-checked on the question of migrant hotels. Yesterday, Labour Minister Alex Davis-Jones claimed the Labour government had cut migrant hotels from 400 to 200. However, a very simple fact-check has revealed it was the Tories who brought the number down from 400 to 213, while the Labour government cut hotels from 213 to 210. A grand total, have a cigar, of 3 hotels in the entire year that they've been in office. Well, I'm joined in the studio now by Amar Jahal, the Director of Legislative Affairs at the Prosperity Institute, as well as a journalist and the former press secretary to Paddy Ashdown, great friend of GB News, Joe Phillips. And I should say that the Prosperity Institute is also owned by the Legatum Group, and the Legatum Group is also one of the lead investors in the holding company of GB News. Welcome to you both. Welcome to the studio. Joe, I'm going to start with you. How long, seriously, can the Labour government keep blaming the Conservatives? Well, they've been in power for a year.
They've been in power for just over a year, in fact. And it was extremely foolish to say smash the gangs, because we heard Rishi Sunak talk about stop the boats. And if you go back since 2010, we have had 5 Conservative Prime Ministers, 7 Conservative Home Secretaries, 11 immigration ministers, a variety of slogans and rhetoric and, you know, buses with go back and, you know, sham marriages and all that, and nothing has worked. What I think is, and where I think Jackie Smith is right, you can't blame the Conservatives for everything. But there were warnings back.
Well, that's what they're doing.
Well, they're trying to. But there are back in 2016, or even before that, there were warnings that this was going to become a problem. Because what had happened, if you remember, Martin, we got the jungle camp at Calais, and people were climbing on lorries, getting in cars, and so on and so forth. Now, I mean, because of increased port security and the ridding of that awful place at Calais, apart from the very odd events like the people who were on Nigel's programme last week who found a stowaway from Sudan in their car, what's happened is that people have gone to boats, and what's happened is that they're using fewer boats but putting more people on them. So there are several things that the government needs to do. One is to stop coming up with daft slogans and actually find out something that makes it work. But the other thing, and this is where there is a problem, and I know you will harumph and roll your eyes at me, since Brexit, we came out of Dublin.
Joe, I knew.
How long was that?
You were going to blame Brexit. I could almost put it in a sealed envelope.
Yeah, but it is part of the problem.
It isn't.
Of course it is, because we left
How many people were returned under the Dublin Agreement? Do you know the answer?
I don't know the answer.
It's less than 400 in the entire time.
But it did mean that people could apply.
474 arrived yesterday.
Yes, I know. And also, what is really shocking in the last week have been more than 100 unaccompanied children. Now, you know, that is a whole different catalogue of human horror and human misery. And I live in Kent, as you know, and that is a huge burden on Kent County Council, on social services, and all the rest of it. So there are huge problems, but we are not alone in facing this. I mean, the whole of Europe is facing a mass of migration.
Was that because of Brexit?
No. Not at all. But part of it was because of Ukraine. Part of it was because of Angela Merkel perhaps mistakenly opening her arms to everybody and everyone. But it's also, you know, there are conflicts around the world, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. And it's time that we had real things instead of slogans.
OK, Amar, Joe Howell, I'm going to bring you in now. The blame game has to stop. The buck stops with the Labour Party.
Well, in the sense that they should have done something in the year.
Well, they're blaming the Tories for 50,000 arrivals since Labour got into power.
So it's important to bear in mind that Labour is operating under substantially the same framework that the Conservatives' legal framework that the Conservatives were operating under, which makes things like asylum hotels quite egregious focal points for aggrieved citizens about the number of asylum seekers in the community. But actually, there are a number of requirements on the Home Office in terms of accommodation and housing, which make it very difficult for the Home Office not to be doing things like that.
Actually, I've got some breaking news for you now, and it's this. More than 2,000 small boat migrants have crossed the English Channel illegally since the France returns deal came into operation last Wednesday. GBNews can reveal it comes a day after this channel confirmed that more than 50,000 migrants had crossed in the 13 months since the Keir Starmer came into power. There you go, 2,000 illegally since that so-called one in, one out deal. I put it to you, Amar Joe Howe, 2,000 in. How many have we seen go? So far, precisely zero.
Yes, so it goes back to fundamental issues with the framework that I currently don't think Labour plan to address, and the number of caveats that are within that Anglo-French migration deal. So it's subject to ECHR and People's Refugee Convention rights to make an asylum claim, and therefore the number of people who fit within the criteria of the French deal for returns is already quite small, and then that's subject to some element of an appeals process. So unless Labour is prepared to look at the fundamental constraints, and that applies to accommodation, it applies to also returns, then they're likely to perpetuate the same things that the Conservatives did.
Can I ask you, in your opinion, whether it would make a difference if there was a legal route? Because at the moment, if you want to claim asylum in the UK, you've got to be here. Whereas before, you could actually claim in the first country, or a country in Europe or wherever you were passing through.
So the principle behind the doubling arrangement is that you do apply for asylum in the EU at the first safe country you arrive at. It was never a terribly effective. It wasn't a terribly effective solution.
They never chose to do that.
Exactly, because in a lot of cases people want to move on to Germany, France, the UK. And that's partly because of the perceived generosity of not just our support systems, but then also how easy it is to get into work, whether people have familial ties, whether there's a community from the country where they're of origin, for example. So,
Joe Phillips, seriously, hankering back to the Brexit years as if it were a solution.
I don't hanker back to Brexit. I hanker back to pre-Brexit.
But you're like saying, let's go back to the Schengen era when you could claim asylum. Nobody did that. They wanted to come to Britain. None of them claimed asylum in Belgium or France. That they came through to Britain, and the notion that we can return them magically under the Dublin Agreement, that didn't happen either. The here and the now is the Labour Party is having a nightmare.
The Labour Party's having a nightmare, but they have inherited an awful lot of problems from the previous 14 years of government. David Cameron, I'm going to bring it down and set a figure on it.
You can't keep blaming the past. Own it today, here, now. 2,000 since the one in, one out deal came. Yeah. Where's the deterrence? Clearly a chocolate teapot.
Well, there are all sorts of issues there, and I think, although we probably don't like hearing it from the French, there is a truth in the fact that people think it's a soft touch here because they can very easily get undocumented work. The government is cracking down on that. I mean, I think there were 3 arrests or 3 prosecutions in the previous 10 years for illegal employment.
You're still blaming the past, Joe Phillips.
But you
we have to move on. I'm being told we must move on to playing what's coming on the show. Amar Joe Howell, Joe Phillips, thank you very much. Now, in a moment, is Britain broken? We will not believe the latest developments of the shocking story of the man who took off his clothes and exposed himself on the District line when he was met with fury from passengers. Guess what? those who apprehended him, they might get nicked. That's next.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Looking ahead to tomorrow, and across many parts of southern Europe, there will be some showery rain around, but plenty of sunshine. And I think the biggest talking point is the exceptional heat. Some very warm air over North Africa has spread northwards into parts of Spain, Portugal, and is going to push to France and Germany as well. Coastal spots are going to be, well, very warm, but it's inland areas where temperatures are going to be exceptionally high, both by day and by night. Plenty of sunshine, like I said, however.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Over the coming days, it is going to remain hot in some places. This could be enough to produce some heavy, possibly thundery showers in the week, and the warm, muggy nights are set to continue. And it's all thanks to that south-southeasterly flow, so we're dragging up some heat from mainland Europe, keeping things quite dry and settled, but also quite warm at times. And as we head through this evening, we'll also drag up some moisture from the southwest, so more cloud just starting to push into parts of south and southwest England, southern parts of Wales too. That could lead us into quite a murky start in the morning. Mostly dry, though we do have some showers just pushing northeastwards across Scotland. But once again, another warm start today. Lows only reaching around 17 to 18 degrees in the south. Now, any cloud that we see across the southwest, it should lift and break through the course of the morning, but it could be thick enough at coasts to produce some very isolated showers. But across Northern Ireland, much of central and southeastern parts of England, northern parts of England too, it should be a bright and sunny start to the day. More cloud across Scotland, some isolated showers just moving their way northeastwards here too. The odd one or two could be heavy, and once again we could still continue to hear the odd rumble of thunder, but they'll eventually clear, drifting their way northeastwards. Any cloud across the southwest will lift and break, and for all, once again, it should be mostly dry, settled and feeling very hot in that sunshine, particularly across central areas. And then we just need to keep an eye on the showers across parts of the southeast, so we may start to see more cloud here into the afternoon, perhaps the odd light shower. But once again, temperatures widely in the mid to high 20s, just pushing into the low 30s across central parts. Then on Thursday, we see a bit of a mixed bag of weather. There are going to be some quite heavy thundery showers, particularly northwest Scotland, drifting into western parts of Wales, parts of southwest England as well. So we need to keep an eye on those showers. They could turn quite heavy and thundery. Otherwise, plenty of sunshine to end the week and into the weekend, and the warm temperatures are set to continue as well. Bye-bye.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date. Or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Farage. Now, here's a grim reminder of the shocking moment that commuters tackled a tube passenger that dropped his drawers on a packed London Underground carriage. Well, as it happens, the people who tackled the man could now themselves be facing arrest. That's right, British Transport Police believe the man, who has since been detained under the Mental Health Act, was assaulted on the District Line and are looking and appealing for witnesses of this grim incident. Now, once again, this raises the question: should you step in to stop disruption or crime on public transport, or might you find yourself feeling the long arm of the law? Well, I'm joined now by the writer and the barrister, the magnificent Stephen Barrett. Stephen, a pleasure to have your show. Once again, a lot of people are watching this at home and thinking, Whose side are the police on? A great many people watching this grim footage, they saw a violent man who was out of control, exposing his genitals in front of children. The commuters stepped in, they dealt with it, they were rough and tumble, but they neutralised the threat. And now they face themselves being prosecuted. It seems once again, Stephen Barrett, we have a topsy-turvy law enforcement process.
Well, we do, Martin, and it's about time to say that this is all deliberate. So let me start at the basics. I don't believe that those, firstly, I think those gentlemen are heroes. Okay, so you and I have met, and I think you're built like the type of man who runs towards the threat. I'm not built like that type of man, but I'm still a man, Martin. So I've been in violent situations, and what I do is gather up the vulnerable, and we head towards the fire exit. That's the type of man I am. You know, during the war, we had the active soldiers, and we had the home guard, I'm afraid. I'm probably more of a home guard type now, but men are men, and men will protect people from violence. And there was a quite clear threat of violence. I watched the entire clip, and you can see young women deliberately moving away because they are afraid, Martin. And if my child or your child was on that train carriage, I would want those gentlemen to do exactly what they did. I'm very proud of those gentlemen. In the old days, we would call those gentlemen heroes. That's what we'd call them. I think threatening them with prosecution is weak. I think it's spineless. I think it's part of the disgraceful state that our nation is in today, Martin. In reality, the CPS will have to check that they can rebut self-defense beyond reasonable doubt, which I doubt the CPS will conclude it can do. You have the right to use reasonable force in the prevention of crimes. In reality, the CPS will have to turn its mind to whether or not prosecution is in the public interest. It is obviously not in the public interest to prosecute these gentlemen. It is just so obviously not that if the state even tries it, I think the state will get itself into more of a muddle. Martin, this has been going on for 25 years, and I've sat in the legal system and I've watched it happen. We have an ingrained concept, not just self-defense, because the criminal lawyers will get all over this. They get very grabby and they'll try and pretend that self-defense belongs to them. But actually, it's a bigger concept than that. It's called self-help. And it's a constitutional provision. And we have it in many other different areas of law. And what the Blair government started to do was it just started to cut them all down. It just started to tweak them all and take them away. So you used to have the ability to take property, take possession of property that you own, things like basic self-help rights. So you don't need the state to help you. You can be a grown-up. And the ability to be a grown-up is being taken away from us. And it's now becoming obvious because we have situations where it is terrifying to be in that situation. And obviously that gentleman needed dealing with. He was immediately turned into a victim, which I think is utterly disgraceful. I saw the word vigilantes used, which again is utterly disgraceful. Nobody wants to have mobs roaming in the streets. But at the moment, our government is just so incompetent that people are going to have to take power back into their own hands. It is our country. It's not theirs. They're not the experts in running it because, frankly, Martin, if they were experts in running the country, that gentleman and what he did would not have happened. So they failed. This is state failure, and those men are heroes.
Stephen Barrett, always on the money. An absolute delight to have you back on the show. It's been waited on, my friend. Thank you very, very much. Get some reaction now from Joe Phillips in the studio. You heard there loud and clear. Stephen Barrett thinks the guys were heroes, and the government is blaming the wrong people.
Well, it's not the government, is it? It's the
arms of the
British Transport Police who apparently are looking at whether or not these people will be prosecuted. I mean, I have to say, you know, and we hear it every single day. Travelling on any form of public transport is particularly grim most of the time, but on London Underground, London Tube trains, it's particularly horrible because there's no escape until you get into a station. You very, very rarely see anybody, a member of London Transport Police.
But Sadiq Khan says crime's down.
Well,
what are you worried about?
Well, crime may well be down in the figures, but this is, you know, this is a man who was flashing. He has been detained, we understand, under the Mental Health Act, and, you know, there may well be, you know, all sorts of reasons why he behaved like he did. But for ordinary people sitting on that tube train...
How are they meant to know anything?
Well, you don't. And, you know, it's just too horrifying. And I think people do need to intervene. I have to say that, you know, I've only seen the clips, and it did look a little bit unnecessarily violent.
What are you meant to do when a man's naked, he's got a belt around his neck and he's screaming murder, he was using expletives, children were cowering?
Yeah, no,
what are you meant to do?
Yeah, but I
make him a cup of tea?
No, nobody's suggesting that for a minute, but there did look a little bit of, and I wasn't there, so I don't know. But I do think there are whole issues, and this is not a new phenomenon. There's the poor shopkeeper who stuck up a little notice to stop the scumbags, shoplifters, and was visited by the police. I think it's in North Wales, but somebody will correct me. Yeah. And now the police have said they're going to have a word with the officer who went round. But the person who reported that to police should have been the person that was told, don't waste our time. Because when the police are dealing with stuff like that, they're not dealing with shoplifters. And London Underground, you know, there needs to be a much more visible presence.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I take the tube home every night, and, you know, I honestly think those kind of incidents can happen anywhere, at any time. And I just think a great many people watching this channel, and certainly it's had millions and millions of views, it's gone around the world, that clip. The huge majority of people think the commuters intervened in the right way and neutralised a very real threat.
But, you know, equally, Martin, there are times when something awful is going on and people are too busy taking photographs of it and actually don't bother to help. So, you know, we're not all heroes, and there are very good reasons for not getting involved, I would say, just as a sort of a safety message to people. But there were a group of people who did choose to get involved. And the most important thing, I think, is that they got him off the train. Yeah. They got him off the train to a station, presumably. But I'm assuming, but I don't know this, that they were also using the emergency communication to try and get help.
They dealt with him on the train. When the train stopped at the next station, they got him off, and he was actually arrested by an off-duty police officer. But without the actions of those good-minded commuters, it could have been, well, who knows what might have happened. That's the point. Thank you very much, Joe Phillips. Always an absolute pleasure. Now, in a moment, a shocking new polling has revealed that the attitudes of Britain's youth, and it is deeply, deeply troubling, because it seems they want to be ruled by autocrats, by despots. We'll also be joined by Reform UK's 18-year-old councillor who says that she has lost friends because she joined Nigel Farage's Reform UK party. That's next.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I ever got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Britain was once the envy of the world, but look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m, only on GB News.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Farage. Thanks for your social media comments. Yes, it has been a lively show. Let's keep cracking on, because today some bombshell new polling has revealed some very troubling news about Britain's youth. Apparently a third of young adults said they would back an authoritarian system if it meant leaders could take decisions more quickly. And the research conducted by the Adam Smith Insights is the latest of many signs that the social contract is in terminal decay. Well, I'm joined in the studio now by Maxwell Marlowe, the Director of Public Affairs at the Adam Smith Institute. Max, always a pleasure. What is it about young people that makes them crave a leader like Kim Jong-un?
I wouldn't say it's Kim Jong-un, but I would say it's more, the UAE, I'd say, which isn't quite, hermit kingdom. It's more a leader who gets things done. And I think this is what underlines a lot of the research we've been doing with this poll through Adam Smith Insights. And what essentially it says is that young people are fed up of the failure to deliver on promises. So we've got 18 to 30-year-olds. These are people who were born and grew up just after the financial crash of 2008. Then they were hit with, a 2-year lockdown under COVID. And then we have this chaos that unfolded with politics and the economy afterwards. So they just want to see their lives change for the better. And I think they're a bit done with Westminster.
But they're surrendering their own personal sovereignty to people who are taking control of their lives. They're giving up.
Fundamentally, yes, but this is how bad. I mean, this polling is not in favour of authoritarianism, not at all. I mean, we are a classical liberal think tank. We believe in individual liberty. We believe in the sovereignty of, freedom. And I think this is the really concerning thing, is that people generation, Gen Z, are now clawing towards a state which is less accountable, that has fewer checks and balances and doesn't value freedom just because they want to see something change. And what we've seen is this is across all political parties: 30% Reform, 30% Conservative, and actually 50% 30% Labour, 30% Reform, 50% Reform. And I think that's really, really concerning fundamentally, because, Nigel Farage is a good, strong leader, and we can see the way he campaigns and the policies he wants to bring in. They are quite strong-headed. But at the end of the day, we know that Nigel Farage does respect parliamentary democracy, hasn't tried to contest the validity of elections, certainly, but people would start pushing that way in the same way that I think Donald Trump may have done in the US.
Fascinating stuff, and a great cue to bring in my next guest now. My next guest isn't ready. Before we get to her, though, so we're talking here about strong authoritarian figures seem to resonate with the young, but only if they're the right kind of authoritarian figure. Most young people seem, at least in this country, seem to despise people like Donald Trump. Why?
I think a lot of it's to do with social media, and I think actually a lot of the drive towards this kind of pro-authoritarian sentiment's going on. So the way I like to imagine it is, you're sat in A&E, the ceiling's falling down on you, you've broken your leg, you're 9 hours into your kind of wait. You open your TikTok up and there are your friends from school, moved out to Dubai where the pavements are clean, the skyscrapers are tall and they're not paying any tax. They see that as sort of authoritarianism, rather than the liberal democracy where we see marginal rates of 40%, nothing works, etc., etc. So it's a really worrying situation that politicians need to own and get a handle on.
OK, well, I'm joined in the studio now by Tom. Of course, Tom is taking over on State of the Nation tonight. Tom Harwood, you're younger than me. You definitely are. What is it about these kind of authoritarian figures that young people seem drawn towards? But only if it's the right kind. They probably like someone like Jeremy Corbyn, but not Donald Trump. Have they simply given up?
Well, I'm still a 90s baby, not a 2000. So I think I fall perhaps in the zillennial or millennial category just about. But there is definitely a very strange phenomenon amongst young people, and it's not a left-right phenomenon. But there are two things going on here in the polling that I've seen. Number one, you see more extreme proclivities amongst young people. They want to see bigger action, different things. Moderation is not a course for them. But number two, you see an age and gender split. The younger you go, the more divided men and women, or even boys and girls, become. Girls going for more left-wing causes, boys going for more right-wing causes. We've seen that in South Korea, we've seen that in the United States, and we're seeing that in the United Kingdom now too.
And I certainly think that's true. My boy is 16 now, and they've been brought up in an environment where men were toxic. They were a problem, particularly if they were white men. I think we've seen the drift towards the political right, particularly amongst young people on the continent of Europe. Are we about to see something similar in the UK? And does this have consequences, Maxwell, about the voting intentions if they're 16 or over? It was considered a shoo-in that they would vote for the Labour Party, perhaps not.
Absolutely. Well, look, I think we're already there. To Tom's point about kind of young men. We saw it with the last election. Younger men tended to vote for Reform and the Conservatives. Younger women did turn to vote more for Green and Labour. That's the new big divide. It's just about age anymore and assets. It is back down to gender. And I think it has got to do with the leftover of the culture war, which I think has been so impacted on young people through school and social media and whatever else. So it's a huge issue that I don't think politicians are understanding. As you're saying, votes at 16 will just put Nigel Farage into number 10. And I think Labour have totally misplayed their hands. They learned what happened in Wales, where essentially you only really vote for the Labour Party, or in Scotland, where you only really vote for the SNP in that demographic. England is a very different ballgame, and I think it's going to bite the government in the bottom.
And I wonder how much, Tom Harwood, TikTok is going to be so important here. We've seen, like, Jordan Bartella, the deputy of Le Pen's party in France, millions and millions of social media hits, just becoming like a sort of rock and roll star of the political right. The way young people are voting has been completely changed. I wonder if the establishment is completely behind the curve.
Well, this is the problem, I think, to some great extent. We used to have a shared culture. We used to have, perhaps, tens of millions of people watch the same television programme on Christmas Day. Now everyone's got their own personal algorithm. Now everyone goes to their own personal sort of feed of what they want to see, and you get a more fragmented electorate. People can, by no fault of their own, literally know no one else who votes for a different party or thinks a different way. And they socialise entirely with different sort of groups that self-select, that ghettoise, that stratified, whatever the word begins with S that I'm trying to find there, that segment society in such a way that actually it becomes harder to talk to one another. And that's why I think it's very good that you started your show with two completely different points of view.
We did.
And bringing that sort of debate back to politics. I worry that things like TikTok actually drive debate out of politics.
I think you're dead right now. Of course, State of the Nation, Tom Harwood, is up next. You're already on fire. What's on your menu?
Well, there's a huge new statistic that Mark White, of course, has brought us this very evening. 2,000 small boat arrivals just in the last week since that new returns agreement with France has come into force. 2,000 arrive, just 50 will be sent back. Why has this gone so wrong? What is the complex web of contradictory incentives that the government has constructed, or I should say successive governments have constructed over decades? Number one, they tell people to stay away. Number two, they lavish them with treasure at the moment they arrive. This is a confused government that doesn't know which way it is facing, and that is driving one of the biggest crises that this country is facing. But also, we're looking at the pharmacist crime wave. We've seen a huge number. 9 in 10 pharmacies say they are suffering a great deal of theft, of robbery, of people swiping drugs and prescription drugs from their shelves. Some to no doubt sell on in illegal drug trade, but also it's part of that shoplifting phenomenon altogether.
OK, well, that's it. The Medicine is up next with Tom Harwood. Thank you very much, Maxwell Marlow. I'll be back tomorrow 3 till 6. Coming up next, State of the Nation. First, is your sizzling weather forecast.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Over the coming days, it is going to remain hot in some places. This could be enough to produce some heavy, possibly thundery showers in the week, and the warm, muggy nights are set to continue. And it's all thanks to that south-southeasterly flow, so we're dragging up some heat from mainland Europe, keeping things quite dry and settled, but also quite warm at times. And as we head through this evening, we'll also drag up some moisture from the southwest, so more cloud just starting to push into parts of south and southwest England, southern parts of Wales too. That could lead us into quite a murky start in the morning. Mostly dry, though we do have some showers just pushing northeastwards across Scotland. But once again, another warm start today. Lows only reaching around 17 to 18 degrees in the south. Now, any cloud that we see across the southwest, it should lift and break through the course of the morning, but it could be thick enough at coasts to produce some very isolated showers. But across Northern Ireland, much of central and southeastern parts of England, northern parts of England too, it should be a bright and sunny start to the day. More cloud across Scotland, some isolated showers just moving their way northeastwards here too. The odd one or two could be heavy, and once again we could still continue to hear the odd rumble of thunder, but they'll eventually clear, drifting their way northeastwards. Any cloud across the southwest will lift and break. And for all, once again, it should be mostly dry, settled and feeling very hot in that sunshine, particularly across central areas. And then we just need to keep an eye on the showers across parts of the southeast. So we may start to see more cloud here into the afternoon, perhaps an odd light shower. But once again, temperatures widely in the mid to high 20s, just pushing into the low 30s across central parts. Then on Thursday, we see a bit of a mixed bag of weather. There are going to be some quite heavy thundery showers, particularly northwest Scotland, drifting into western parts of Wales, parts of southwest England as well. So we need to keep an eye on those showers. They could turn quite heavy and thundery. Otherwise, plenty of sunshine to end the week and into the weekend, and the warm temperatures are set to continue as well. Bye-bye.
Today, clouds overhead. Total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
There's just 3 weeks to see how you could win your mortgage or rent paid for a whole year. That's a cash lump sum equivalent to 12 of your monthly mortgage or rent payments, right up to a whopping £20,000. Plus, we'll add an extra £5,000 on top for good measure. Make sure you don't miss out as lines close on the 29th of August. For another chance to win, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB15 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 29th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas